Welcome back to Random Tek. On this episode, we're going to be attempting to connect a vintage Apple printer, such as this Apple StyleWriter 2, to a modern Mac. Why? Because it's random. Now, as a quick overview, for those of you who are not aware, Apple used to sell their own branded printers from between 1980 and 1997. These included mostly dot matrix, laser, and inkjet printers, but they also sold some thermal, daisy wheel, and even a plotter. In the case of this video, we will be going over the StyleWriter 2, which was released in January 1993 and discontinued in April 1995. Like most of Apple's printers, which were just rebranded printers from other companies, the StyleWriter 2 is no different, being a rebranded Canon BJ100, in a slightly different case. Looking at an old promotional sheet for it, we can see the StyleWriter 2 was capable of printing up to 360 dpi with a typical speed of 2 pages per minute. I picked up my printer from a local classified ad for about $20, and it came very nicely packaged in its original box. Opening up the box, we can see a smaller accessory kit, which we will come back to. And here we have the actual printer itself, which still has an old ink cartridge, which we will need to replace. Looking through the accessory kit box, we find the software on 3.5-inch floppy disks, the serial cable, the power cable, and finally the user's guide, which I have linked to in the description for those who are interested. From a quick inspection, the printer looks to be relatively clean. However, close up, you can see some grime and debris needing to be cleaned, especially on the inside. A somewhat quick wipe down later, it is looking much better. Now, thankfully, the compatible ink for this printer can still be found relatively easily. After installing the new ink cartridge, we can hold down the power button when turning it on to initiate a test print. The good news is it feeds. The bad news is nothing prints, and it sounds a little off. So I took out the ink cartridge and using some isopropyl alcohol, cleaned the ink holder and retried. However, this made no difference. So I decided to open up the printer to see if anything inside looked off. It all seemed good to me. none of the capacitors looked swollen. So I put it back together and went searching online for my answer. I came across this old post with a user having a similar problem. Apparently, the ink head, which is attached to the actual cartridge in this case, can get clogged. Now this was supposed to be a new cartridge, but I figured maybe it had been sitting around for a while. So I followed the instructions, placing the head on a wet paper towel overnight to see if it improved. I'm not entirely sure if this was the true problem or not, as the next few test prints resulted in the same no printing issue. I just kept retrying the test print and eventually it worked. Now we can go on to the process of actually connecting the printer to a computer and using it. While we are using a StyleWriter 2 in our case, this process should in theory work with the following other Apple printers. The original StyleWriter, the StyleWriter 2, of course, the StyleWriter 1200, the color StyleWriter 1500, 2200, 2400, and 2500. As well as the original ImageWriter, ImageWriter 2, and ImageWriter LQ, and possibly others as well. The one big caveat to this process is that, from what I have read and tested, you would need a middle computer running macOS 10.6 or earlier, as while you can install all the required software on operating systems afterwards, there seems to be some additional system blockage not allowing the printer to actually work. If you have gotten it to work on newer systems, please comment below and let me know your experience with it. Besides the computer, you will need a keyspan serial adapter to allow you to connect the serial port of the printers to USB. For this process, I will be following a well-written article by John Galt on the Apple community section going over the process of getting an ImageWriter to work. We will follow their steps closely, just changing a bit at the end for the StyleWriter. The first step is to install the latest driver for the keyspan adapter, which surprisingly is a universal package with a 64-bit installation. Talk about great software support. However, while it will still install onto the most recent macOS, due to system security changes, it isn't able to properly access the needed system locations to work properly. After installing the driver and plugging in the adapter, we can head over to the extension area under the system profile to see that it has indeed installed properly. Going into Keyspan Serial Assistant, we can see adapter showing up too. Now we have to install two system components for everything to communicate with each other. The first is the Foomatic RIP file. The second is the GPL PostScript interpreter. Now this is where we are going to diverge from the original instructions. As the next step we need StyleWriter drivers and not ImageWriter. I will leave the link to this tutorial in the description for those who wish to follow the rest of the ImageWriter instructions. and in the future, if I ever obtain one myself, I will make a follow-up video for it. In the meantime, we can Google Fumatic StyleWriter 2 driver and head over to the Linux Foundation to download the top driver. If installing this driver on Mac OS 10.5 or above, you will encounter an installation failed error at the end. However, you can safely ignore this as the key components are actually still installed. Now we head over to the two AppleScript programs. First, choose a serial port, which will be the key serial 1 option, and the adapter will automatically figure out which port the printer is attached to. Next, we are going to add our StyleWriter printer to the computer. You can see various printers available to add, but for us, we would choose the StyleWriter 2. And that should be it. Going into System Preferences, we can now see our newly added StyleWriter 2 show. So now let's attempt a test print to see if everything went to plan. Unfortunately, no, it did not go to plan, and this would turn out to be a bit of a nightmare to figure out. The first thing, and one of the simplest things to test, was the cable. While it looked pretty good to me, I thought to double check to make sure all the pins did work. Using the Mac cable check I demonstrated in a previous video, that you can see all the pins did indeed pass data through. So next was the software. Perhaps somewhere along the line I missed a step or did a step out of order. But reinstalling all the software resulted in the same problem. Well, perhaps it was the computer or operating system I was using. Even though, from what I had read, this should work fine on mine, I thought to try some others, which also resulted in the same way. Now this led me to believe it was either the adapter or the actual printer causing the issue. So I got another adapter, this one in a box. Would it work? No, it would not. Well, it must be the printer then. Perhaps some internal circuitry was not up to the task. So I got another printer. Color StyleWriter 2200. While a slightly different printer, it uses the same software setup as the StyleWriter 2. Did this solve the problem? No. Now, I was pretty much out of ideas, as everything on its own seemed to be working, yet nothing would happen. So I posted my question online to a vintage Apple forum, 68K MLA, and waited. Someone responded with a link saying to check out this blog post. In a nutshell, what it was saying was my specific keyspan adapter, USA-28X, was not actually truly supported by the driver. Now this did confuse me a bit, as the adapter did show up on the device manager as being recognized. And I didn't read any notes online about it not being able to work. However, looking back, when I did install the driver originally, it never actually mentioned my exact keyspan adapter, USA-28X. So off to purchase yet another adapter, which took a while to show up on eBay, but at last I got it. Model USA-28XG. Side by side to my original adapter, it looks almost identical aside from the model number and a green PCB inside now. Testing this new adapter resulted in... At this point, I was really set back. This should have worked. I tried multiple printers, computers, adapters, and cables? Well, actually, I never tried a different cable. According to the tester, the cable worked just fine, so why get another? With letter S to try, I went looking for a cable on Amazon, and read a couple reviews of different options, and what I saw froze me. This won't work to connect your vintage Mac to vintage gear because the connections run straight through rather than crossover. a crossover cable, meaning that the pins do not correspond one-to-one from each end. This had never even ventured into my mind, as I figured the cable that came with my printer must have been correct. But looking online again, there are multiple references to the printers needing a crossover cable. So I purchased one, and here it is now. You can see, putting it through the tester, the pins are definitely crossing over on the new right side cable compared to the original left side cable. Now, the moment of truth. Is this new cable the solution? Yes it is. I couldn't believe it. The printer finally came to life. To be honest, I was half expecting the ink to be dried by now. With the printer now working, we can finally finish this video and print from a modern computer. To do so, go into System Preferences on the computer you have the printer connected to and head over to Sharing. Make sure that the printer sharing option is clicked on, and that's it. As long as this computer remains on and connected to your network, it will broadcast the printer for anyone to use. Going into my modern MacBook Pro, you can see under Printers that if I click Add, the StyleWriter shows up. So let's finish up this video with the printer test from my modern Mac to both the old StyleWriter and my modern Epson printer. While the StyleWriter had the initial start, when the Epson printer finally kicked into gear, the speed was no match. The results from the StyleWriter actually weren't too bad, but you can see the Epson printer being less fuzzy around the edges of letters and images, and this wasn't on its best printing setting either. That concludes another episode, taking much longer than I had originally imagined. Let me know in the comments below if you have ever tried to connect a vintage printer to a modern computer using the process, and what your results were. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.